add a comparison here, and the comparison that I'm going to use is tramadol versus placebo. And then I will select next. And you have a few options here. You can either do nothing, add an outcome, or add another comparison. I'm just going to select finish here quickly just to show you what it looks like when you stop at this stage. So it just gives you the structure of your comparison table. Now I'm going to select add outcome. And you have your options here, whether it's dichotomous data, continuous, whether you're going to use your observed minus expected and variance, whether you're using a generic inverse variance method, if you have hazard ratio data, let's say, for example, or if there are other data. And for this particular example, I'm going to use dichotomous data. I'm going to select next. Okay, and at this point, you indicate what your outcome is. And so I'm just going to add what mine is, and it's people with at least moderate improvement of pain. Okay, and be as explicit as possible when you're completing this. And so rather than just leaving it as experimental, I'm going to add tramadol, and then I'm going to add placebo. Okay, and these are the headings for when you have your data shown within your forest plot output. I will select next, and here is where you select what your statistical method is, what your analysis model is, and what your effects measure is. So I'm just going to leave the Mendel-Hansel with fixed effect, and I will select risk ratio, and then I will click next. Before I do, you can see there are a few items that are grayed out, and those are items that are not available according to your data type, your outcome type, which makes sense. For example, I'm not using continuous data, and so I wouldn't have access to mean difference or standardized mean difference. Okay. Now I will select next. At this point, you can edit your outcome if you need to. You can add your subgroup, add your study data, or add another comparison. Okay, I'm just going to add my study data, select finish. Next pops up the dialog box where I add my studies. So I'm going to select all of these, and all I'm doing is holding down the control command, and as I'm clicking, and then I'll select finish. Okay, and so here we are. I'm just going to just format the view a little bit here. Okay, and so for those of you who have done meta-analyses or are familiar with this in the past, here is the standard view that we have within RevMan. So you can see the studies, your tramadol, your placebo, so the two comparison groups. Then you add your people with events, total number of people within each group. And then as we go along, as you'll see, when we enter the data, then some of the other information will fill in. At this point, do I have a few volunteers who would like to help me conduct this meta-analysis? And it's as easy as me giving you control of my RevMan application, and then I would just walk you through adding in the data. Is there anyone out there who would like to join on with me? You can raise your hand, or you can send me a message through. Okay, great. So Faiz, I'm going to give you control, and then I'm going to do is if I only have two people, maybe I'll have you do 2 studies, and then I'll have Rachel do another 2. Okay, so I'm going to give you control, and now you can just take your mouse, you move your mouse around. Perfect. Okay, so so you're in the events for the MQ trial, so you just type in 54. So we have 54 people at the event of a total of 91. Okay, and then in the placebo group, 34. Okay, 71. Now take your mouse and select the next row down. Okay, so just pause just for a second. So what you can see is the data that you've just entered has now appeared within the draft forest plot. So it's a nice dynamic feature. You can sort of see it build as you're going along. Okay, so on to Fleischmann. 28, 62, 18, and 64. Excellent. So select the next row down, somewhere in one of the white spaces there. Great. And then you've added the next one. Thank you so much. Why don't we give applause to Faiz for helping us out here. Thank you very much. Actually, you can use your emoticons as we're going along in the session. Please feel free to do so. Excellent. Okay. Rachel, you are next. So I'm going to give you control. Okay, so you should be able to take your mouse, go to Malone. Perfect. Okay, so add in 66, then 85, 67, and then 112. Again, select the row below somewhere, and you see that data pop up. Great. 159, 197, 62, and 111. Okay, now just click somewhere else in the white space, or there. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. Why don't we give another round of applause? All right. Thank you very much for joining in. So it's as simple as that. And as you saw, it updates the meta-analysis sort of as we go along. Another nice feature that RevMan 5 has is in this view, you can see the data look quite small based on the way that the scale is. And what I'm going to do is you can see at the bottom, if you can see my cursor, I'm just going to expand it out. Okay, and then you can view things a little bit better. What you wouldn't have been able to have seen in the smaller view is that in the second trial, you can actually see that the confidence interval went beyond beyond this line of 1, which indicates no effect. But when you explode it out, when you expand it out, you can see the data a bit better now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to select up here where it says forest plot. And when I click on this, this is where you get that final view that you're used to seeing for those of you who are familiar. Where you see each study, you see the data for each one, you see your final meta-analysis, you see your diamond there. When you look at your information for heterogeneity and your test for overall effect, you see that there as well. At this point, if you want to, then you can click it and say, yes, I want to add it as a figure. I'm just going to, I'm not going to do that for right now. I thought we would do that in the figures section. I am going to just cancel it for a second because I mentioned about sensitivity analysis. So let's say you've predefined an item that you want to look at sensitivity analysis for. At this stage is to look at this and say, okay, does this make sense? Maybe I'll just open back up the forest plot. Okay, now because I sort of pulled this together, I'm familiar with the data. When I look at this, I can say, you know what, it doesn't make sense because the data that were included in the studies, well, it favors tramadol, it favors the experimental arm, and all the data here is showing that it favors control. And what's happening here is because I'm looking at a beneficial outcome. Just to remind you, we're looking at improvement of pain, and you would expect that your relative risk then would be greater than 1 when it's favoring your experimental. So what I need to do here is I need to switch the labels on my axes. So I am just going to just cancel this out. If I go to this properties box here, this is where if you've gone through and you're entering your data and you realize, oh, I made a mistake, I have a risk ratio instead of odds ratio. This is where you could change it if you needed to, rather than going back through all the other steps. Some details, you know, if you want to make sense to change your confidence interval for some reason, if they have an option of swapping your event to non-event for dichotomous data, there are some options there. I'm just going to go to graph, and this is where I would change the left should actually say placebo, and the right should, so I'm just going to select apply. And so if we look over at the meta-analysis while I'm doing this, you should see, great, it's saying placebo, so it's in the right spot where I want it to be. And I'm just going to say tramadol there, and again, I'll just select OK. So great, so now it's appearing the way it should be. The data makes sense. Great. So we're ready. Okay, that is sort of what I wanted to show you in a nutshell. Are there any questions in terms of functionality information regarding this at this point? Okay, Fayez, why don't you go ahead? I'm going to release my audio and you can activate yours.